Good afternoon. I'm Adrienne Maslin, Dean of Students at Middlesex Community College. I'm subbing for President Anna Wasesha today on this edition of Middlesex Moments. My guest today is Professor Christine Ruggiero. Professor Ruggiero is a member of our English department, teaching expository writing, creative writing, and English literature. She is also the faculty advisor to the college's Creative Writing Club and is one of several faculty members who supervise the production of our literary journal, Pegasus. Professor Ruggiero, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Christine, thanks to your efforts, Middlesex Community College is going to be hosting author and Middlesex alumnus Beverly Donofrio for a series of 5, I think, readings and workshops. I'm wondering if you could start off by telling us how did we get so lucky that we get to host this woman?
Well, I wish I could take all the credit for it, but a friend of the college, Jim Simpson, who's also a faculty in the psychology department, knows Beverly. And he and President Wasesha made a connection, and Jim contacted Bev and asked if she would be willing to come to Middlesex to give a talk. And at that time, that was over a year ago, and at that time nobody knew what the program would be or how many events. We thought maybe it would be, a reading. We weren't sure. And so for a while, I worked with Jim in arranging the program for Beverly. And then over the last, I'd say 6 months, Beverly and I have been working together in creating this wonderful program that spans our campuses. So Beverly will be in Middletown as well as in Meriden. And so we've just been fortunate that, we had a connection. And she came to Middlesex.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a true success story of one of our alumni.
It is. Yes.
So what's the schedule of events? Where will they be? When will they be? What's happening at each of these?
Our first event is next Tuesday, March 4th, and it'll be a book reading. Beverly will read from her 3 memoirs. Her earliest memoir is Riding in Cars with Boys, Confessions of a Bad Girl Who Makes Good. It's a pretty sexy title. That book was made into a movie. I think it was in 2001, and that became pretty popular. A lot of people know the movie as well as the book. And she'll be reading from that book. She'll be reading from her second memoir, Looking for Mary, and her third and most recent memoir, which was published in 2013. And it's called Astonished, a story of evil, blessings, grace, and solace. And so she'll talk really about her life and her journey, and as she calls potholes that somehow became stepping stones. That's her expression.
That's a nice way of putting it, nice way to phrase it.
Yeah, it is. I can tell you a little bit about where that came from. The idea of potholes, literally, Beverly was struck by a car when she was living in New York City.
Oh.
From a pothole she didn't see, fell, and the car hit her.
Right.
And it was during that recovery time that she decided to go to Columbia University and get her MFA in creative writing, and that's where her first memoir kind of grew.
Fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
So that's her first reading?
That is
discussion?
That is her first reading and book discussion.
Okay.
Yep.
What's on tap after that?
So after that, she comes back in April, and she will be the keynote speaker at our Women Students Forum, April 4th. And it's an all-day forum, and Beverly will be the main speaker that day, starting at around 9:30. She will also do a book signing that day as well. And then she'll do another discussion at our Meriden campus for students there who can't make it here. And then a discussion led by one of our librarians, and that's a real student-centered event.
Well, Christine, we will continue this discussion in just a couple of moments after this message. Welcome back. This is Adrienne Maslin at Middlesex Community College, and I'm here today with Professor Christine Ruggiero. And we were just talking about the schedule of events for author Beverly Donofrio, who will be on our campus in March and April. And we mentioned several things. On Tuesday, March 4th, there's a book reading and book sales and signing here in the Middletown campus. On April 4th, Beverly Donofrio will be the keynote speaker at our Women's Student Forum, which I'm hoping we'll get a chance to talk about a little bit more later on in the program. On April 8th, Ms. Donofrio will be at our Meriden Center for a book discussion. And on April 9th, she will be back on this campus again for another book discussion with the Middletown faculty, staff, and students. There is one more event that I'm going to ask Christine to talk about, and I believe that's a showing of the film, Riding in Cars with the Boys. Is that correct?
Yes. Thursday, April 10th, Beverly will join us for a discussion of the making of the movie, Riding in Cars with, and we have a script writing class who will be in attendance, and that class has read the screenplay, as well as the literature classes will be there too. So she'll talk about the making of that movie. And students will have seen the film in their individual classes before coming to that discussion. And following the discussion will be a writing workshop for anyone who's interested in flexing their memoir writing muscles, led by Beverly, which is really a special event. We're really fortunate to have such a talented writer.
I think so. You've mentioned so many things that strike a chord with me, so I have so many questions. Let's see if I can get all of these in within the time we have. You mentioned about the students who are reading her books in their classes. What's their reaction to her stories, her life stories? And I'm wondering, do the female students react differently from the male students?
That's a really good question. I think that both, at least from what I could tell, it seems to be pretty gender neutral, acceptance of the book and of her stories. I think the resounding reaction has just been being inspired and also her vulnerability in sharing her story. Some of our students may have similar stories or similar hardships, but just maybe have never talked about their problems before. And so just reading about all that she's been able to overcome, I think help them to see I can do this despite X, fill in the blank. I mean, there are so many blanks, right? So many X's to fill in. Right. But I mean, her story, over and over again, her memoirs just show how you can kind of turn disaster into something that's hopeful and blessing even. That's her word she uses often.
This might be a good time to talk a little bit about the Women's Student Forum that we're going to be having at the college. And I know this event, Beverly will be our keynote speaker, but because of that, we've decided to make the event focus on the concept of writing, the arts, and healing. And I'm wondering if, as a writer yourself, Christine, if you could give us your perspective on how writing can kind of facilitate the emotional healing of a person.
It's been my experience that it's cathartic, that the written word is a way of releasing some kind of emotion. So it's transference. It's transferring something that perhaps has been bottled up that is now no longer bottled up because there's a space for it. And not just a space for it, but a space where it can live and breathe and be shared even. And I think it's in the sharing of the writing too that makes it even more powerful when somebody else can say, I can relate, to what you've been through. Just to share a little bit, we offer a creative writing reading at the end of every spring semester. And last spring, we had a student who closed the event with a poetry slam on how he was bullied. And it was really powerful, and it had a really powerful message. And I've seen so much growth in this particular student since that time. And I've seen people go up to him and say, how brave he was and courageous for sharing. But it's a powerful healing tool. And Beverly talks about it at length, about just finding sort of spiritual healing, however you defined spirituality.
I know for the Women's Student Forum, in addition to having Beverly be our keynote speaker, we're going to be having Charles Barber, who's a visiting writer at Wesleyan University, also speaking on kind of similar themes. His topic of his discussion will be The Life You Save Could Be Your Own, the Benefit of Narrative. And then in the afternoon, we'll be doing some breakout sessions, one of them being Writing as a Tool for Healing with Dale Griffith, one of our own English professors, Delivering Your Story with Ann Shapiro of the Connecticut Storytelling Center, and a session on how the arts, which will really focus on music for the most part, how the arts help to heal with Douglas Johnson, who's a retired professor of composition at Trinity College, and he's currently doing work on trying to, I don't know if he's going for a degree, but trying to segue into music therapy. So I think we have a number of topics focused on this concept of the arts and healing and writing. And we will also be having one financial session at our Women's Student Forum because it's a big draw and our students often really need some greater financial information. So before we continue with the topic of writing and healing and all of that, I do want to mention that all of the events are open to the public. So all of the events regarding Beverly Donofrio, the Women's Student Forum, the public is invited. More information can be found at our website, which is www.mxcc.edu, and all of these events are free as well. Christine, if we can switch our direction a little bit, I'd like to talk about creative writing at Middlesex Community College. And it seems to me that in the past, 5, 6, 7 years, creative writing has really blossomed at the college, thanks to your leadership and several other faculty members at the college in the English department. I'm wondering, what is it that attracts students to creative writing, do you think?
I think that it's just writing that's so different from academic writing, from essay writing, from prose, that it's a welcome sort of relief to students to not have the boundaries and the constraints of structure, organization, and the kind of key elements of essay writing, thesis and topic sentence, which they've heard over and over ad nauseum. So I think that it's this freeing, idea. And again, I also think that a lot of students connect to some kind of art, whether it's film, whether it's music, poetry, fiction. So students find an outlet in many different genres through creative writing.
Christine, when I came to Middlesex, it seems to me, and I came here about 15 years ago, it seems to me we didn't offer any creative writing. So this is a real change from previous years.
When I came in 2004, creative writing wasn't being offered. And it was a real interest and passion of mine. And so for one class, it was Little Engine That Could, just kind of building slowly, trying to generate interest and lay our tracks. And so we offered one course, and then really we had a lot of interest, and so we were able to offer one class every semester. And then we kind of layered that with one class every semester and then an online class of creative writing. And most recently, we've added creative writing memoir. So we have memoir writing. We have creative writing fiction, which we're offering in the fall for the first time. And this semester, I'm really happy to report that we are offering creative writing poetry. So we have a poetry writing class, and it's running, and I couldn't be happier with that. And when we started Pegasus, the literary journal, I went through some archives, and I did find some old creative writing journals from the 70s. So at one time, apparently, creative writing and the arts in terms of poetry and fiction were well and thriving and alive here at the college. So I'm glad that we've been able to revitalize the program here.
Right.
And I'm not alone, of course. I mean, there are other faculty who are teaching these classes and who are just as interested in growing this.
No, I've noticed that. And, one of the events that I think many people on our campus look forward to each year is the Poetry Festival at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing the work that you and Dale Griffith do and others decorating our student lounge and really making it into a kind of a coffee house kind of atmosphere. And I admire the students who get up there and read some very personal poems.
It's a real source of pride for the students, and it's an accomplishment. It certainly is. And we all, I think, feel the pride that the students feel too.
Yes. We're going to take another little break here, and we will welcome back to Middlesex Moments. I'm Adrienne Maslin, here with Professor Christine Ruggiero. And Christine, perhaps we can focus a little bit on both the book and the film, Riding in Cars with Boys. Now, I know the film stars Drew Barrymore. Could you give us any of the background information on that film?
Well, it was based on her memoir, which was published in 1990. But it's based on her early life, well, her teen life really, from in the 60s. And specifically on her teen pregnancy, her brief marriage, and her divorce, and her going to college and how college really changed her life. She grew up in Wallingford, Connecticut, interestingly enough, and her father was a police officer in Wallingford. And Beverly became pregnant. This is all in the book. When she becomes pregnant and then gets married, and the marriage doesn't work out, and she's a single mom, and struggling to live on her to live on her own, she has these roommates and she becomes a real drug den. Plastered all over the paper. She's arrested. She's given parole, trying to get her life on track. And so she realizes that she needs help. So I think she calls a psychiatric center or clinic at the time. And so they say, you're a really smart girl. You should be going to college. And she said, well, I don't have any money. I don't know how to get there. And they said, well, there's this new college up on the hill called Middlesex Community College, and we'll help you get there. And so she came to Middlesex, and from here she received a scholarship to Wesleyan University, and she graduated Wesleyan in 1978. And she hadn't started riding in cars with boys yet at that time. But when she left Wesleyan, she moved to New York City with her son. And again, she just was spiraling. She went there to be a writer, and she took a lot of these odd jobs just trying to make ends meet for her son. And she talks about that towards the end of her book. But it was in New York that she said, well, I need to really do something with myself.
Right.
And it was after she hit that pothole. Well, she hit the pothole and then she was struck by the car that she said, I need to do something. And she saw this ad for Columbia University for their MFA program.
Okay, now if we can backtrack for a moment.
Sure.
I don't think I heard this part about the pothole and the car. I know New York City very well, and I've fallen into some potholes too, except I only sprained my ankle. I didn't get hit, fortunately. So
she was walking across the street, and she says that she was, again, in a very dark place. And I think maybe she was even drinking, and I'm not sure what else, but she wasn't feeling very strong as a mother, as an individual, as a productive member of society. And she saw herself, I guess, with this man and heading in the wrong direction. And she literally was struck, literally by a vehicle, after tripping in this pothole. It was a wake-up call. She couldn't work. She was, I think, injured, not severely, but enough that it gave pause to her life.
Right.
And that's when she decided to break up with the bad guy and enroll in Columbia in the MFA program. And it was her thesis that started Riding in Cars with Boys. Her thesis at Columbia was the beginning of that book. It was about 150 pages.
Interesting. What a story.
Yeah.
She's an incredibly resilient woman, and seems to have led an incredible life. Not necessarily a happy life, but she's quite remarkable.
She said that again and again, what first seemed like disaster ended up being a blessing. And then I read somewhere that she quotes Oscar Wilde, who said, "We are all of us lying in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars." And I think that definitely captures her view of the world.
I don't know, you may not know the answer to this, but do you think during any of her presentations she might talk about how is it that some people can be so resilient? Much of what she experienced would have devoured other people, but it didn't devour her. Is that something that you think she might talk about, or has she ever written any comments on that?
I do think that she'll address that. I think that her book talking about seeking help and being aware, that self-possessed to say, I'm not doing well, I need some help. And having, a champion or somebody to help support you in some way. And I don't necessarily mean financially, but I just mean in advice and guidance, as somebody did for her therapist, I think, in getting her to college. But also, she talks a lot about her latest memoir is about blessings and about grace. And she talks a lot about finding solace through spirituality. And her latest memoir is about her rape at 55 years old when she was living in San Miguel, Mexico. And in the book, she talks about how she was really looking for monasteries at the time of her rape.
Really?
So she finds great irony, in that. And she, after the rape, she left Mexico and she lived for 4 years in Colorado as a lay Carmelite, which means that she spent her life devoted to the Virgin Mary. And it was in Colorado where she wrote Astonished. And she will be reading from that.
Wonderful.
As well.
Wonderful. Is there a passage from that you are able to read for us?
Sure. Even though I do know the important question is not why this happened to me, but what I'm going to do now. And even though I was 55 and the attacker was a serial rapist in a small town, raping gringo women between 50 and 60. And even though I, along with the entire town, felt like evil had come for a visit and it was not personal, and even though this little round-faced pervert with a big-billed baseball cap woke me in the middle of the night, in the middle of a deep sleep in my own bed with a knife inches from my face, I was absolutely shocked that he chose me. This was not supposed to happen. I was supposed to have escaped. I had hot flashes and liver spots and was finally in the final stretch. I'd survived all these decades without experiencing this thing I dreaded as much as death, and had just been looking for a monastery to join for Christ's sake. This is the beginning of her book, Astonished.
Well, if a paragraph like that can't get somebody drawn in and out to that bookstore and buying that book, I don't know what can. I have a feeling I'm going to be running out to the bookstore not too long from now.
I just wanted to add one thing about the importance of faith to Beverly. And I think that her story, too, of how her first book became really famous is important because it shows the importance of having faith in ourselves, despite what others may say. When Beverly was at Columbia and she wrote the beginning of Running in Cars with Boys as her thesis, it was not evaluated well whatsoever. In fact, the evaluation went something like this: Beverly Donofrio's energy has been mistaken for talent. I mean, the irony is so great right now that we can laugh at that. Right. And she's an acclaimed writer, so she was devastated and crushed by this. But she said, okay, she had a connection at the Village Voice, and she submitted an excerpt almost from her thesis. Same thing: father's a police officer, teen pregnancy, and one of her former professors from Columbia saw it, a different professor from the evaluator, and he called her and he said, I'm giving this to my agent. And that's what happened. Out of that came a New York Times bestseller, came a wonderful film that is really popular even to today. And when I ask my students, have you heard of the book Running in Cars with Boys? No, but I've seen the movie.
Right, yes. Yeah.
But now they're going to be reading the book and seeing the film again. So I think there's faith in terms of religion, but there's also faith in herself.
Yeah.
And others having faith in us, too. That really helped her.
Is she living in Connecticut again?
We're not really sure. We know that her son lives in the tri-state area. And I know that in many of her writings she talks about her grandson. She talks about him with such joy. And so there was some buzz that after she left Colorado that she might be moving back somewhere in the tri-state area.
Right.
But I'm not sure right now.
Well, Christine, we have a minute or two left, and I'm wondering, it might be helpful to the audience if you could review for us the program of events and tell everybody how to contact us.
Sure. Our first event is next Tuesday, March 4th. And it starts at 12:30 to 2 o'clock in Chapman Hall, the upstairs of Chapman Hall. On April 4th, we have the Women's Students Forum, and that starts at 9:30 in the morning, also in Chapman Hall. On Tuesday, April 8th, we have a reading in Meriden. And on Wednesday, April 9th, we have a book discussion in our library, which is in Chapman Hall. And then our last event is on Thursday, April 10th. We have a film discussion of Running in Cars with Boys, and then we have a writing workshop following that. All of our events, just as a reminder, are open to the public. They're free. We have free parking, ample parking, handicapped accessible parking. And if anyone wants more information, they can check out our website, but they can also check out Beverly Donofrio, DONOFRIO.com, because she also lists all of the events that are taking place at Middlesex on her own personal website.
Wonderful.
So you can, people can check out our website at Middlesex or Beverly Donofrio's website as well.
Is there any last thing you'd like to close with?
When we first contacted Beverly about coming back to Middlesex, this was her response. And I quote, "I would love to come to Middlesex. Love it. Without Middlesex, to accept a single mom with a kid and a low high school average, I would have never had the amazing life I've been blessed with."
Wonderful. Well, we love to think of our college as being that helpful to all of our students. And it's certainly nice to know that we were at least helpful to this one student. So, well, I want to thank you very, very much. I'm looking forward to all of the events, and I'll be there, and I hope our audience will come and join us. So for Middlesex Moments, this is Adrienne Maslin along with my guest Christine Ruggiero, and have a great day.